Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. Today is Monday, November 14th. Let's hop in. So, for the accountability section today, I played the game The Fall twice. Once to play the game regularly, and then once to go through the developer's commentary, and mostly almost 100% disagree with every single thing that was said in the developer's commentary. The Fall is not a game that I can uh, recommend because it's not really a game. It's half a game. It ends on a cliffhanger. It gives you not really any kind of satisfaction in even its kind of unhappy ending. Um, but when you listen to the developer commentary in particular, as they talk about how they want it to be a trilogy and how it was this Kickstarter game, and how it's supposed to be a game that at one time was going to have a lot of like religious allegories and implications in it, and then they took all of that out, and yet you still see a lot of robots crucified in the background for kind of no reason. Uh, and then the main theme of the game is supposed to be, in part, according to the developer's commentary, about like feminism, but like first wave feminism and women being forced into the kitchen into doing domestic tasks. But you're playing as this robot in a sci-fi robotic facility on some distant planet. And the robot may have a female voice, but it never occurred to me when I first played the game because the game is incredibly short too. It's only like 3 hours at most. Um, yeah, I didn't get any of that. I don't inherently think of a robot as being the equivalent to a human female um, just because. Oh, there's a survey here of the fact um, that it has a female voice. I just kind of think of robots having female voices as being a coin flip. Pacing of the animations. I think the pacing of the animations is pretty bad. Dual controls. I think it could be kind of bad. The time limits in PvP. It is way too short for me. Oh. And then I would say that's too short too. I'm mostly playing ranked mode, and then events. Nope. Definitely shouldn't be click mostly playing team battle. They just added that. Still another mode. I find it a little difficult, honestly. I'd say probably not. Stories. Like, I really don't want to encourage them to get rid of the stories or add to the stories. Menu screen for the solo mode is easy to understand and use. I think you could probably say that is pretty bad. Want to play to earn rewards? I can play myself at my own pace. I like the option to try different loaner decks. I'm still struggling with this. And I'm still struggling with that. These surveys are way too long. And then I stopped talking because I'm doing this survey. Am I enjoying ranked? I'll go neutral there. I'd say yes, the rewards are way too low for this. Easy to understand and use as far as the screen for ranked duels. Well, it's pretty simple, so I'll go neutral. Hmm. Often I don't know how to win duels, but we'll leave it at just I play to earn rewards. Let's see. Am I having fun with these festivals? I don't want to encourage them to get rid of them completely. The Duelist Cup was awful, though. Special Duel Link Reg was awful. So let's just go with festivals. Play because I want the rewards. Just answer with that one. Duel rooms. Not using it at the moment. I think the team battle as a duel mode, I'll also say I'm just not using it at the moment. Oh, I should have done this off screen. Yeah, the other theme in the fall that that is a I will say this and this and this and this and definitely this. Just focus on that because this is the best one. I can't get the cards I need to build. Deck slots are not enough too. Let's go with that. Shop controls. I'll go neutral on that. Overall satisfaction probably scales everything back. Implement new cards, definitely. Improve the deck editing situation and improve the pacing. Yeah. So is that worth 10 legacy packs? Probably. To do that survey, but boy, is that slow. That's like 8 minutes. They've updated the rewards for the Duel Pass. I think I have to buy the new Duel Pass. And then there's going to be a festival between November 16th and November 28th that's going to take up all of our time. So any issues as far as playing ranked may get trapped around doing festivals. The other themes of the fall, if I started that sentence and didn't finish it, according to the developer commentary, it's supposed to be like Russians, like Cold War Russia. I don't know how. Like the commentary, I think, jokingly said that it had something to do with Russia, as they were talking about you having to do with a rat that stole a laser pistol, at the very beginning of the game. It just does not make any sense, and it really set the tone of the developer commentary, since that was a early comment that really made it seem like the people on the commentary really didn't care about the game. I'm not sure if I fully believe that they were actually the creators of the game. One of the guys talks about the other guy in the first name, in the, like, by his first name, as if he's not in the room. So I was never 100% certain that he wasn't actually talking about another person that just happened to have the same first name. They definitely come off like they smoked a lot of weed or did the magic mushrooms or something and came up with a lot of ideas, mostly visual ideas, and then they tried to wrap a story around it, and I really wouldn't say that they did a great job there trying to wrap a story, particularly since it's a cliffhanger and just doesn't end on anything. It comes off the whole general idea of the game would be that you're given a bunch of programmed rules as a robot, as an AI, and in those rules you try to find catch-22s or ways in which you can push the rules to break the rules without actually breaking the rules, just arguing semantics instead of the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law. Which, honestly, if they'd kept in the religious aspects and the bad guy in the game had been like obsessed with like the 10 Commandments, and throughout the whole game you were breaking the 10 Commandments, it would have worked fairly well. But there really are only 3 rules in the game, and the points in which it decides you've broken the rules and then you no longer have to follow those rules are kind of arbitrary. And I don't know how that specifically comes down to just 3 rules or anything like that. Like the wrapping it instead around feminism just doesn't ring true. It doesn't make a lot of sense. A wife in the old days when women had no rights would be given a lifetime of rules, not just 3 rules, and they wouldn't be really written down anywhere. So the comparison just doesn't make any sense. And frankly, the only way I think the story would have made sense to me if it had been the way it had been written is if you start off in a robot suit and think you're a robot, and then at the end the reveal is actually no, you're this you're actually a human woman, and you just thought of yourself as a robot, and so you imagined it, either that everything you saw in the game was totally a dream, and then you would just wake up in like a therapist's office, or you were in a sci-fi world, but the robotic suit that you are in, because the robotic suit is holding a human, was actually still being controlled by the human. They just had hit their head at the beginning of the game and thought that they were the robot instead of the human. There are definitely scenes in the fall where that would have made a lot of sense, because you have to go through this facility's test for domestication, even though you're a military robot that wouldn't have been a domestic robot. And so there's a point where you're having to stop a baby crying, and instead of doing it in a normal way, it takes a dark comedy way in which you just basically kill the baby, or the fake baby. It's not a real baby. So in a lot of ways I suspect that is close to the narrative of like Returnal. But yeah, the fall sucks, and it's just not worth playing. There's a fall 2, but they want a fall 3. Or at least they said so in the developer commentary of the fall 1. the game doesn't deserve to have a developer commentary so short anyways. I almost certainly confused The Fall with The Swapper, which was a game that came out somewhat similar. Games like The Fall really highlight how there's really just not a lot of protection against buying a bad game on Steam, particularly if it's just being hyped up. It's another game I almost certainly saw on Giant Bomb, and they just talked kind of about it for 5 minutes and were very nebulous about it. And even if Giant Bomb had said The Fall sucked, I probably would have blocked that out and still wanted to buy the game and play the game. So yeah, I played The Fall as far as the accountability section, and then I started playing the fan mod Resident Evil 4 HD project, and so far it looks great, and it sounds good because those are the things that have been tweaked, and that there is a Resident Evil 4 tweaks that are installed with the fan project that I've found can change the field of view a little bit, and it allows for bigger amounts of RAM to be used, either computer RAM or video card RAM. But the controls are awkward, to say the least, for Resident Evil 4, and it's very noticeable why, when you start to feel it more than when you look at it, why Resident Evil 4 and these other Resident Evil games needed to effectively be remade and rebooted as a series. Now, we're going to get some other changes that depending on how much you care, maybe you'll be upset that it isn't going to be the purest of remakes or just a remaster with a better control scheme for Resident Evil 4. But yeah, the controls are rough. The fact that Resident Evil 4 was originally a GameCube game and then a Wii game, and trying to play it on an Xbox controller really just highlights the kind of awkward control scheme that it has, in which you can't run and shoot at the same time, which was an artistic decision. I will almost certainly believe that. But that is awkward. The fact that the right stick very abruptly changes the camera, because there really wouldn't have been a right stick camera. So when you start to move even a little bit, the sensitivity on that is fairly high. So yeah, it's gonna take a little while for my fingers to get too used to it. I'm also playing the game on normal, so I'm taking my chances there that I can either turn it down to easy, which I probably can't, or that I can beat the game on normal, which I should be able to. The New Game Plus capabilities of Resident Evil 4 would make an argument to play it on easy, but then you also unlock hard, and then you unlock more things with hard, and inherently I doubt I would actually play the game on hard to unlock everything, when it would just be so much easier to go get a 100% unlocked save file. And some of the shooting gallery stuff later probably doesn't change much as far as whether something is on normal mode or on easy mode. But yeah, so far in one episode that I've recorded, I've seen no micro stuttering, because I specifically went in there and disabled full screen optimizations, which was causing the micro stuttering in Windows 10. And yeah, I have no thought whatsoever that I'd want to go and do Um, of no desire whatsoever to oh, I lost my train of thought there. Well, I guess what I was trying to say is that I don't think I'd ever really waste my time trying to play Resident Evil 4 more than once just to unlock everything, and when I could just get the save file anyways. But I am definitely playing the Fan HD remaster on the idea that this is pretty much the last time I'll ever play the original version of Resident Evil 4. Like, they'd really have to screw up the good parts of Resident Evil 4 to not have the remake be better in every way, or in enough ways that in the ways that it's worse it doesn't matter. There is a difference, I think, that needs to be pointed out. As much as I'm a proponent for adult content and adult games and not censorship and not changing games, there is notably a small level of nuance I'm willing to accept to say, well, when somebody's going to make a remake of a game that is not designed around being like having dirty jokes in it, which that's basically all Resident Evil 4 ever did have, is it had a couple of dirty jokes, a couple lewd comments, and that's it. So if all of that gets taken out, it is censorship, yes, and I'm anti-censorship, but it's not a core component of Resident Evil. People don't remember Resident Evil for the president has equipped his daughter with ballistic missiles comments. They remember it for its epic set pieces. It's epic battle. It's not running and gunning, but it's standing in place and shooting. It's horror elements. The Fall had a lot of horror elements also, which fell very flat. A, because you're a robot, and so seeing a corpse should mean nothing to you as a robot character. And B, because it just doesn't lead to anything, really. So I can somewhat forgive Resident Evil 4 Remake for getting rid of the lewd comments. I could do that certainly way more than I could do, say, Bayonetta, getting rid of all of the lewdness in Bayonetta. That wouldn't really make sense because Bayonetta is supposed to be this very sexually liberated, strong and empowered female person that uses their sexuality in the way that they want to. So if all of a sudden Bayonetta was not doing that, then you've just completely destroyed the character, and the character in Bayonetta as a character in Bayonetta is way more important than the characters in Resident Evil 4 at all. Because, like, really the characters in Resident Evil 4 can't matter that much because there's just too many of them. Like, by far, like, Leon is the main character, and by far he just doesn't really matter that much. Leon, I think, is a completely different character in RE4 than what he was when you first saw him in RE2 or RE3, wherever he shows up there. And the Resident Evil series is just until maybe recently, they've always been fairly uninterested in developing even a single character for very long. And sure, a lot of this may just be self-justification, and maybe I should stand stronger against censorship in all of its forms. I imagine what we will find out, though, is that a lot of the dialogue is just rewritten, and the RE4 remake in general is just going to be at least 50 to 60% new content as far as new dialogue and new things being said. Now, I guess this inherently also points out that if I'm playing Resident Evil 4 Fan HD pack now, that I probably am somewhat committing to the idea of trying to buy the Resident Evil 4 remake game when it comes out a little bit quicker, and being just more on the ball with that series, which that's gonna be a tall order, like, because ideally you'd want to go through Resident Evil 1, which I think I own the latest remaster, which isn't quite a remaster, I'd say, for the series that we're currently in. But yeah, ideally you'd want to go through the Resident Evil remaster, then the Resident Evil 2 remaster, which is part of the series that we're in, and then you would want to do the Resident Evil 3 remaster. Any side games are highly unlikely to be remastered. Okay. So we got away with that, which will let us activate Zeus, which hopefully that will allow us to actually use Zeus. You would hope this would work. If they can counter this, then I'm in trouble. Okay, good. And I guess I could have waited until he played some more cards, but whatever. So my goal over this week will be to probably try and beat Resident Evil 4 completely, which might be a little bit asking a little bit too much. Like, it is definitely going to be an attempt to kind of rush through the first run, and if I could get through the first run fairly quickly, then play a second run, but that's probably also asking a little too much. It is a weird position certainly to be in as a video game critic, to play a fan mod, because any bugs, any audio, any visuals I see are just not coming from the product that is being sold. They're potentially coming from the fan patch, because it fixes bugs and audio, like visuals and audio. And definitely there are books and textures I've already seen that stand out as like, this doesn't feel like this was a thing that was in the game originally. So much so that I'm not even sure the intro at the beginning of the game was there originally. But I just don't know. I guess this is somewhat equivalent to watching a high school performance of Cats being better than the Broadway performance of Cats. It would be a weird experience. And I guess the fan project is available to download, so it is something you can get. But and I'll definitely have to make sure to put a link in the description to it. But it is this free project. It's just not really a commercial product as much as you would think. So yep. See if we can just do this and ruin your strategy. He's just playing spells now. He knows he's lost. Okay. Let's do this. So we can destroy this. Summon this. So we can activate this. Do this. We should have more than enough cards to summon that. And that should win. So he just surrenders there. Yep. It's been a while since we've had to even think about the gold pass. And I guess the gold pass is the only thing that's really going to get you any crafting points, other than just opening a bunch of things. Can't even visually really see this. It's just like barely a face with a bunch of red around it. That's a very bad icon. At 75 you get a marshmallow. And I think I imagine we'll very quickly get the gold pass filled up again, and then for 2 or 3 months, however it lasts, that will completely forget it even matters and exists. With the low humidity and just coldness, I've woken up almost every day last week with my arthritic hands hurting quite a bit. So I've ordered some compression gloves to see if I could try and use that, because it was getting really bad. Which that definitely will affect how much I can play video games. And then I guess for the other accountability section stuff, I did install a Google Play beta on Windows, That was an article that linked to it. I thought, honestly, it was going to let me install basically any Google Play game. Um, it made me turn on a feature that I didn't even know about in the BIOS for hardware virtualization. Um, it's like under advanced features of the CPU is SVM or SBM, something like that. And just by the default BIOS settings, that was disabled, and then it made me restart the computer a second time after enabling that BIOS feature to install a virtual machine framework. And then once I finally got into it, the number of games you can actually install is just insignificantly small. It does have Arknights, so I guess if I wanted to play Arknights and then stream that instead of playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, there might be a thought there, but honestly, I have no interest at all in streaming Arknights or replacing Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel with Arknights. I was hoping I could do Destiny Child, because particularly on my computer I could not install the uncensored patch, and then it would only be slightly lewd, and then that could combine the amount of time I waste playing Destiny Child with the live streams. That would be self-satisfactory and almost certainly get me no new views and potentially lose me viewers. But yeah, that's not an option. So I guess at some point, if Google Play comes out of beta as far as Windows, Google Play on Windows, particularly Windows 10, since Windows 11 is implying that almost every Android game should work. At least that's what they're shooting for. It does open up the door that I could show off a mobile game. I don't know specifically why I would show off a mobile game, though. Like, that does inherently beg a bigger question as to I'd basically have to play a mobile game that I thought was really good and then play it a second time to make footage around it. And frankly, any game that is even slightly good that's a mobile game tends to have a Steam version, and playing games on my Google Play account is getting away from playing games on Steam, and keeping all the games in one place. It almost certainly is going to be too little too late. Well, if the Steam Deck becomes really prevalent and a lot of people have them, there would be no reason to try and play Android games on a PC then. Marvel Snap, which I'm still playing stupidly, already has a Steam version, so that would be the only other game that I could even begin to think I'd actually want to cover. But I guess I took those steps forward so that is a potential option if something did come out. Ironically, using virtual machines, it might be the only non-emulator way that you could show anything ever made by Nintendo, because if you could get Super Mario Run onto Google Play on Windows, then you could stream Super Mario Run and some of those games. But why would you care to do that anyways? And then when you think about like Pokemon Go, and where you have different locations, the only way you could possibly play that game is on a PC is if you were faking your location and effectively just cheating. Let's see. Did I do anything else? No. Not that I can remember. So we should just jump into the news. One of the things, I gave administrative privileges to Resident Evil 4 when I first ran it, and then that caused OBS to not be able to, like, to record it and capture the window, which was an interesting little twist. On top of that, it caused OBS to not be able to capture its hotkeys, which that was shocking. So I was hitting the hotkey to start recording, and it just was not doing anything, and I was like, oh, well, that's weird. I assume some of that has to do with the fact that there's the Resident Evil 4 tweaks being implemented too, is that it's maybe got an extra thing in it just to manipulate things and capture inputs, because it is changing the controller inputs too, removing dead zones and things like that. Arguably, Resident Evil 4 tweaks, even without the fan HD visuals, is something that you should consider installing. And there is definitely a question, certainly, since it's already been kind of proven that, I think it legally has been admitted at this point, that some of the artists in the original Resident Evil 4 stole artwork and didn't license it properly. You would have to keep an eye out to see if they wouldn't try to pull the same trick again and steal the fan textures of the HD remake for the new game. But I bet they won't, because it's easier now to license higher 4K, 8K type textures, and just start over from scratch, since they're starting over anyways. So yeah, it would be incredibly stupid of them, since Capcom as a Japanese company has already lost face for being caught stealing our textures. The last thing they'd want to do is lose face again and be called out on something that everybody is going to check them on. I guess my biggest potential concern would be, are we potentially going to get like a completely different game in later parts of Resident Evil 4? Because I kind of wouldn't be surprised if they did change significant portions of it and just touched on the general idea. I'm fairly certain there will be a village, and there will be a castle, and there will be a island, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was another location that's brand new, and the layouts of the locations would be completely different. Or the events that occur might even be completely different. Setting spell cards. Yeah, and generally, I guess I don't have much else to say. Yeah, generally there's just not really a reason why I'm playing Resident Evil 4. I wanted something more action-based after Darkest Dungeon, but actually once I started controlling it, until my hands get used to that old control scheme, uh, you're not, it's really not as much of an action game as I really should have picked. But it does certainly make sense to play it now before the remake comes out, because then there'll be no interest in playing it once it. On Twitter here, we have YouTube creators saying content or behavior intended to harass or bully others is not allowed on YouTube. Here's a few scenarios that violate community guidelines: malicious sharing of info about another individual, threatening someone's physical safety, much more here. Tweets can be a lot longer than this. I have no idea specifically why they're putting this out. At a certain point, YouTube creators probably should once a week or once a month just cycle through it. It would probably be smart if it just said monthly rules reminder. Inherently, it is also important to point out that YouTube is, and its content policies and community guidelines strike stuff, they are nebulous and ambiguous and arbitrary and ridiculous, and so content creators are just never on the side of YouTube and YouTube's moderation team, because YouTube's moderation team is this Illuminati, basically a hidden group of people nobody knows about and nobody can contact, and even if you could get a message from them, because I literally just heard this story from another YouTuber, like all they get is bots just repeating the exact same thing, saying you violated this guideline, read the guidelines, and that they just will not tell you what part of the guidelines, which are too long and not specific. And frankly, the truth of the matter is that it's just all a lie. It's obviously it's all a lie. There is a bot or an algorithm that they don't know how it works, and that when the algorithm says something violates the family guidelines, they just agree with the bot and they just lie through their teeth to support the bot. And so, yeah, content creators are just never on the side of YouTube, which it would be fairly easy to be on the side of YouTube if we just saw examples of bad actors getting caught a lot. Like, the story never goes, here is an internet troll that made a YouTube channel that's trying to dox somebody or harass somebody, and they got taken down, and now they're complaining that their video got taken down. Because usually the internet troll knows that what they were doing was going to get taken down, so they just stay silent. Instead, what we always hear, even if that does happen quite a bit, is the stories of the false positives, or at least people that believe it's a false positive and can tell a very compelling narrative about why it's a false positive. And YouTube has not done anything to fix that. As far as the actual tweet, though, I mean, I can't really disagree with monthly reminders of basic things that maybe should just bear repeating. Although I doubt very many content creators that would actually try and harass people are following YouTube creators on Twitter, so you very possibly are just shouting into the void with that. And it does come off as somewhat negative. For not the best of reasons. It seems like I'm not winning as much. Or maybe this game is just taking too long. I'm on the verge of reaching platinum, and that may just be on the verge of where this deck stops working. And there is an argument, certainly, to just give up and stop trying to even bother to play. Ranked play once you've gotten to platinum. I guess I should also say I watched Warrior Nun, which is as part of the accountability section. The second season Warrior Nun. Well, the first season kind of ended on a cliffhanger. The second season, kind of ends on a cliffhanger, but also would be a fairly decent ending. But I do think overall, the first season of Warrior Nun, as far as I vaguely remember it, was fairly rough. And then the second season is less rough, but it turns it more into a linear action series. I think inherently the problem is that they hired a bunch of people who are either good actors but not good, like, kung fu action people to be the warriors of Warrior Nun and the other nuns that fight. And so I think they kind of are struggled to try and get them to do action scenes that they couldn't do. Very notably, there's a scene in the first series, I think particularly, where a warrior nun completely covers her face with this like chainmail veil, and that is obviously done so that they can just put a stunt woman or stunt man even in place of the actual actor. Overall, I think the problem is it just kind of doesn't go anywhere. If anything, it kind of goes in a weird direction, I would say. Almost like a light novel romance where two of the main nuns are in love with each other but can't admit it, and you could tease that idea, but Warrior Nun really bends over backwards to make nuns be cool, or nuns be woke, or nuns be anything other than what they actually are. And suppose it, by the end of the second season, has completely decimated and destroyed the idea of the entire Catholic structure and Catholicism. I imagine Catholics didn't like even the first season of Warrior Nun. They're gonna really, really hate the second season. It would have made more sense to have the nuns not be Catholic at all and call themselves nuns but not really be nuns at all. In the same way that there is a magical device called a halo that really doesn't look that much like a halo. I would recommend watching Warrior Nun Season 1 and Season 2 together if you are going to watch it, compared to watching just Season 1 and then waiting. I also rewatched all of Season 1 of Inside Job, which is still pretty good, but it's kind of lackluster in the number of episodes it has. The good news there is more episodes are coming in, I think, about a week for Inside Job. I watched also the Treehouse of Horror episode of The Simpsons, and boy, does the Japanese animator and writer who created the Death Note parody in The Simpsons really just blow away how awful, and it really just highlights how awful The Simpsons looks in its regular animation style. They totally should have put the Death Note section at the end of it instead of in the middle, because the entire segment of 3 segments after that just is shockingly hideous to look at. As far as the parody of Death Note, like visually, yeah, it looks great, and it is leaning into the idea of being a comedy instead of just being a direct parody, which is a little bit more than I expected, but I appreciate it. But it kind of can't do too much, and your experience will vary greatly if you don't know anything about Death Note. Like, it is, I think, a great example of what a Japanese person would do with Simpsons and the comedy around The Simpsons, which is to say that they really wouldn't do that much with it, and they probably would make it not feel that much like The Simpsons. Although The Simpsons probably wouldn't hurt too much if they did hand the entire series over to a Japanese team, or just a new team in general anywhere. It would be an interesting experiment, or a way to kill The Simpsons finally, is to just say, let's just hand it over to a completely different writing team and see what happens. Like, arguably, I think most people who liked The Simpsons have long since stopped liking the current seasons. I don't watch The Simpsons regularly, and I don't think many people do these days. Yeah, I'm a little surprised that I haven't ever run across anybody that has tried to abridge The Simpsons or make like a supercut. I think part of the problem is I have actually seen somebody give like a recommended watch order of The Simpsons, and then they're mostly saying watch all the early episodes of the first 4 or 5 seasons, that there's just no garbage that you can really skip. I think I probably shouldn't even be playing one more game. Like, I don't think we're outside of the range of a point where I could go up a rank. Black Friday is quickly approaching, and I'm starting to see some sales, but I don't really want to buy anything. So I'm kind of preparing to buy something if there happens to be some like motivating factor to buy something specifically on Amazon Prime or through some other slick deals, but yeah, ideally in this window shopping that I'm doing, I did come to a weird realization. There is not a lot of humidifiers, which because I could use a better humidifier that actually would come on and off by itself, whether that's connected through a smart home like the Tuya system, which is what I'm using, or HomeKit or something else, or not. like, it doesn't really have to be connected, but it would be nice if it was connected. But yeah, there really aren't any humidifiers that also have a clock and alarm clock function. And it's just kind of ridiculous that some of these gadgets haven't evolved much in 20 years, that you would have seen them in a sharper image catalog for a lot more money 20 years ago, and the features are just exactly the same. It would be so logical for like a bedside device to be a humidifier, a sunrise alarm clock that lights up an LED and simulates the sunrise, and a Bluetooth speaker or noise machine. But also, why, if it's going to be a noise machine, why not a Bluetooth speaker? Like, those four objects should be one device sitting on your bedside table instead of potentially needing two devices. And yeah, any humidifier practically can do aromatherapy, diffuse oils if you're into that, so that adds yet another feature. On top of that, humidifiers still are like kind of ridiculously expensive for the technology in them. But yeah, we probably aren't going to see a very high rate of new gadgets coming out for the next 5 to 10 years, I would suspect. But yeah, as far as bedside table devices, it should have been like the cell phone. The cell phone takes a calculator, a personal digital assistant, a notepad app, an alarm clock, TV, web browser, laptop. It takes a lot of those devices and merges it into one, and in some of those devices a cell phone doesn't do a perfect job, but it does a good enough job, to the point where most people don't need to have a separate calculator at all in their life, ever, and people don't need separate cameras in their lives. Okay. So we send this. But yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Best I have found is that there is a sunrise alarm clock with a Bluetooth speaker in it, but it doesn't have the humidifier, and it does connect to the Tuya system, and I am mostly limiting my searches to the Tuya system. But that's about the only thing I'd even think about buying, and even that is just an experiment and a gadget. There is a book I'd like to get that's brand new, so it's at full price, so I don't know why I would pay that unless there was a sale. And I can get some more printer paper. Certainly that's a very boring thing that I need to get, or another smart plug from a different manufacturer to try that. I did it did occur to me that I would like to use 90-degree elbows on my irrigation system instead of trying to dig super deep to have the tube curve around, because PEX is just way more rigid than I thought it was going to be. Which, yeah, okay, that works. That works as an idea. But Also, because it's cold now, I'm not going to work on the irrigation system or even turn it on until probably spring, so that puts me in a no hurry to buy anything, particularly on Black Friday. The buy two, get the third free, or buy three for the price of two sale, however they describe it, on Amazon is a fairly limited amount of stuff, but it does have some video games. I could barely find 3 Nintendo Switch games that would be interesting for me to potentially buy, and they're not like good Nintendo Switch games. They're like Hot Wheels games and the Ninja Turtles collection, which neither one of those I'd say are bad games, but they're not AAA Nintendo games. But so far, any pre-Black Friday sale really hasn't been anything. I did get some recertified, like refurbished mouse and keyboard, and for like $3.50, and at that price that makes some sense, but that was more of a slick deals than a Black Friday sale. The Video Game Awards, or the Game Awards, had some nominees. God of War Ragnarok and Elden Ring headline it. I don't know. As far as nominations, Game of the Year is God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West, Plague Tale Requiem, Xenoblade Chronicles 3. I'm a little surprised that even made it to the list. Maybe that's just throwing a bone to Nintendo. Stray, which I kind of forgot about, but was very popular by at least video game journalists for a while there. And then Elden Ring. Now, effectively, I think this is an attempt to have 2 Game Awards this year, and potentially even move the Game Awards to be in the end of the year award season instead of the instead of being so connected to the E3 timeline, because I think in previous years that's how that really played out, is that you would have around E3 a week, no, usually a week before E3, the people voting on the Game Awards would have already picked their games of the years or the games of the show to highlight, and then you would have had kind of a sticker that you could have put as a winner of that award during the E3 presentations. But since E3 is now obviously not being connected to the Game Awards at all, they're actively moving to I guess just separate themselves, which I wouldn't be surprised if that means that we will eventually have E3 giving themselves a whole different award system. It feels more natural, certainly, to have Game Awards happen at the end of the year than it does in the middle of the year. The nominees for innovation and accessibility are As Dusk Falls, God of War Ragnarok, Return to Monkey Island, The Last of Us Part 1, and The Quarry. It certainly highlights where game developers' thought patterns are and how they are just interacting with each other in the sense that everybody is talking about accessibility to a ridiculous amount. If we actually do want to talk about accessibility, though, I will make it a point to point out that there is a horrible accessibility decision made in the fall, in that the main menu is all visually jumbled and difficult, if not impossible, to read. Alright, I've lost at that point. And there's just no way to fix it. So, like, you have to just kind of guess at what buttons you're clicking on. And that just doesn't make any sense at all. You could have the same idea, but have the menu perfectly readable and then have it glitch after you click the button, and then just have like 5 seconds of an animation of the menu broken. Or you could have it glitching in different places in different ways every second or so. That way you could see all the letters, but it doesn't do that. So there are just parts that are visually glitched the whole time. And they even do that in the credits, which frankly is close to illegal, I think. If you were contractually obliged to list people's names because of Kickstarter or because they worked on the game, actually, way more people are listed in the credits for Kickstarter. Like, I really ended up playing 2 Kickstarter games back to back, and it really just highlighted that I am not happy with the way Kickstarter games have come out at all. Inflict damage on an opponent. These have like 15 days left. I almost wonder if the system has kind of changed as far as how that all works as far as daily quest. I guess there was also a thought of potentially opening 30 packs here, but we have like plenty of time if we were going to do that. Yeah. In the next 56 days, I would like to spend probably at least 1,000, if not 2,000 or 3,000 on this, but also have enough to potentially spend 3,000 on any secret packs that pop up. Although arguably I may not really even need to spend 3,000 on any secret packs, because I may have already saturated as much of the secret packs as possible. And then yeah, there's still a point here where I need to find some free time to just try and craft normal cards. Just to get to a point that says we own 1 copy of each normal card. There's not really a way. Oh, I should also point out that this I looked at, and this takes you to a website. There is no app around this. The website has kind of like a cell phone mobile version. When I opened it with my cell phone, which you almost certainly would do, scanning a QR code, it's rough, to say the least. It's not a app, which is what I was expecting, where you could just have a separate app to build your decks and share your decks. It is go on this website. Now I know Magic the Gathering had a website that was kind of like that too, where although I think you actually could play Magic the Gathering on that website, and like Magic the Gathering Arena should have replaced that completely, but didn't quite replace it completely because the rule sets and the cards were different. But yeah, the idea of just having a website seems pretty crazy. Okay, so yeah, the second category here is innovation and accessibility with Last of Us Part 1, The Quarry, Monkey Island, God of War Ragnarok as Dusk Falls, Best Debut Game, Neon White, Stray, Narco. I thought there was another game called Narco, but I guess there's a new game, Tunic, and Vampire Survivors. At a certain level, maybe Tunic should succeed, but I think most people would have forgotten about it, so depending on when people actually vote on these things, Neon White or Stray may win just because of timing. Next, we have yet another SJW category, and remember, social justice warriors are, or at least originally made fun of, and I still mostly make fun of them because they're not actually doing anything helpful. Like they're not pushing or donating to charities that actually work with real humans and make the world a better place. Instead, they're just putting out tweets and virtue signaling and often trying to change fiction, video games, very often. Like, instead of improving the lives or the representation of real humans, that they're obsessed with improving the lives or the representation of virtual characters, which just doesn't make any sense at all. At a certain level, I might agree with people if every single TV show um, promoted the idea that, or if every single video game promoted the idea that being an alpha male was a smart move, then maybe there would be some toxic masculinity arguments to be made. And I know from the crazy SJW perspective, that's exactly what happens, is that there's too much violence, too much aggression, too much toxicity in video games. I just don't agree with their assumption because they're looking at the world through too small, too myopic of a lens, and they're seeing things that are not there in the numbers that they think they are, or there is not there at all. So, games for impact, though, that they have listed As Dusk Falls, A Memoir Blue, Citizen Sleeper, Ending Extinction is Forever, Hindsight, and I Was a Teenage Exocolonist. At a certain point, putting this close to best narrative, I think highlights how these games probably don't have that great of narrative, and if anything, Games for Impact might be the exact opposite of best narrative. Here's a game we want to give an award to, but it actually has a crappy story, so it's not being impactful for its narrative and its story. It's being impactful because it's cramming down a message down your throat. At a certain point, this should be best propaganda, if that's really what you want to call it, if you want that kind of category, because that's, I think, more what they're voting on as the aspect in that game. Best narrative: play A Plague Tale Requiem, Elden King, God of War Ragnarok, or Immortality, and Horizon Forbidden West. Also, take note here, there's just like completely small companies, never heard of games compared to major games. Now, at a certain level, I kind of do agree with the idea of award shows trying to highlight and give more awards to a more varied field of nominees instead of just everything going to God of War Ragnarok, which almost certainly half of these awards are going to God of War Ragnarok or Elden Ring. But it's not even really reflective of gamers at a certain point, and I guess these award shows never were. Gamers probably are just going to play God of War Ragnarok and Elden Ring, and the vast majority of gamers are never going to play any of these games, so there isn't a relevancy there. So, on one hand, you either have an award show that is designed to give awards to niche games that very few people will play, which is fine, and then you should just get rid of the AAA games, and then it should just be a kind of indie small game award show, much like the Cannes Film Festival. Um, Marvel movies not going to Cannes. Marvel movies also not even really getting a lot of Oscars, um, because there is a desire amongst those award shows to highlight more artistically designed content, or smaller made content from smaller producers. Uh, so either you have a AAA show and say these are the best games of the big games, and really it should just come down to that. It's like limited audience reach, or small games, AAA games, AA games, single A games. That's what I've been calling it for a long time. It's AAA, single A, AA, indie as concepts. Those concepts are very nebulous, certainly. But you could say best game made under with less than $10 million, and then make the games admit how much they're spending, or best game developed with less than 100 employees. Best game made by a small team could be fairly nebulous. Yeah. Then there's best game direction, which I think that's a dumb category. You really just have no idea what a manager, developer, producer, you just have no idea what influence they really are going to have on the game. So if you're trying to give an award because you think the manager, producer, game director has affected the game greatly, you're really guessing at that point. If they mean the direction that the games actually go narratively, that's a weird category also. Like, to say you like God of War Ragnarok because it goes in one way that you expected it to go, or it goes in a moral way or virtuous way, or a way that you approve of, seems ridiculous. Let's say at God of War Ragnarok, everybody expects the main character to survive and win and defeat all his enemies. If he dies halfway through the game and fails, would it lose best game direction because of an unexpected twist? I don't know. Best performance, on this I think you are fairly well suited to judge. And if anything, this award is almost the opposite of this award, because you can barely, and I mean just barely, take away from a performer's performance and say maybe there was a director who pushed the performer to do better. But that's all you can really take from them. At the end of the day, each of these voice actors, face actors, gave that performance. They actually did it. You can see the fruits of their work very obviously. There are perhaps some editors that tweaked their voice lines, and visual artists who tweaked their appearance, but as far as the raw emotion that they put behind their voice and their facial movements, you can't really say anybody else other than the actors did that. So this is the kind of category that is actually really good and obvious to have. That being said, you have lots of people playing lots of characters. Best ongoing game, I don't like this idea of a game being an ongoing game. I don't like the phrase per se, but I guess it is better than saying best live service game, which is what this really means. Apex Legends, Destiny 2, Final Fantasy XIV, Fortnite, and Genshin Impact. And I guess if Fortnite wins there this year, that's probably a way of getting Epic Games to be friendly with the award show, because I don't think this year in particular Fortnite deserves to win. In a lot of ways, I think Genshin Impact probably deserves to win, but I could also see Final Fantasy 14 winning. Then best score is Elden Ring, God of War Ragnarok, Xenoblade Chronicles. Again, they're trying to just throw in Xenoblade Chronicles, Metal Hellsinger, and a Plague Tale Requiem. I wouldn't be surprised if Plague Tale Requiem doesn't succeed to get a single award. And best audio design, which I guess that's definitely going to be a difficult category to award, because you're going to inherently subconsciously want to give this to some game that has very good score and music, when really you'd have to keep an ear out for the bullet shot sounds in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. And this might be a way in which they throw a bone to Activision Blizzard by giving them best audio design to Modern Warfare 2 that they probably don't deserve. But Elden Ring has a high chance of succeeding. Same is true for like Gran Turismo 7 here, is best audio design of the engine roar. I also wouldn't be surprised if Horizon Forbidden West doesn't get any awards. There's definitely a couple games here that could be set up to be snubbed. Let's see. The award show itself is going to air on December 8th, 2022, which is only really a couple of weeks. Susan Wojcicki here, not really saying anything here, is just retweeting to another YouTube employee, a YouTube liaison. We're so glad you're here as the YouTube liaison. 4 months as the YouTube liaison, I've never been prouder, more grateful for the brilliant, thoughtful, and caring, and responsible people I get to work with. This kind of like circle jerk or brown nosing on Twitter really shouldn't happen. It really is just brown nosing. And it just is not the kinds of internal communication that you should be having on Twitter in the first place. The more cynical among you may assume that this actually might hint at something else, that there's actually some sarcasm in the tweets, but taking it just on face value, there's just really no reason to be on Twitter. Honestly, there's very little reason for Facebook people or YouTube people, either, really, to be on Twitter and using Twitter. Like, particularly to communicate with fellow co-workers. That should be done between YouTube's own system, which they're still working on, certainly, but obviously with the idea of handles coming out, they're trying to work towards having a system that is potentially going to replace Twitter. At least that's their hope. I don't know if it's really going to succeed. At this point, I think I pretty much have to give up on the idea of getting a handle I'd like to get, and their rollout of handles, I think, is just going to be labeled with this problem, in that there are, in my case, a 13-year-old channel that hasn't posted anything. Well, it's at least 13 years old. It hasn't posted a video in 13 years. It has two videos that look basically like private videos, and I bet that whoever made that channel and uploaded those videos long since has forgotten about it, and very possibly can't even log into the channel to change their handle or make their channel private. So yeah, that inevitably anybody that tries to comment with @Rydo, RYDO, is going to be contacting this other person instead of me. Yeah, and I imagine that's just going to be the problem in general. I'm not saying that YouTube needs a verification system. It will need a verification system eventually, and they should be working on that, but it does need a way to make a unique name and a unique handle for each channel that makes some sense. They're selling yet another Mass Effect. I guess this is a onesie now, according to BioWare, which, I mean, that really highlights how much Mass Effect has fallen, is that they're really only interested in selling merchandise around it. Which that is also the problem with, like, the American McGee's Alice Madness Returns, Alice Asylum, which is the third game that's in pre-production. But the vast majority of what American McGee is promoting is selling just merchandise around that series, and their plushy dreadfuls is what they're called. So they've just become this Chinese merchandising company instead of a video game company, which is crazy, certainly. Moving on, we're trying to go through the Video Games Chronicles articles quickly here. God of War Ragnarok sales break the franchise launch record in the UK. We already talked about Kevin Conroy died at age 66. PlayStation VR 2 version of No Man's Sky will be ready at launch. Still not a great argument, though, to get the PlayStation VR 2 since it has no backward compatibility. Sonic Frontiers director says he's taking feedback seriously. Morio Kishimoto says Sonic team is taking feedback from players and critics. I'm kind of in a weird position with Sonic Frontiers. I've seen that it seems like people reviewed it on Metacritic fairly well, giving it 88 out of 100 type scores. But Video Game Donkey seemed to show that it was really a buggy mess. And I don't know if that's just a case that Video Game Donkey is making a counter review or a counter opinion, or if it really is a buggy mess. So I'd like to hear better sources than just a joke video game critic and Video Game Donkey. And that's kind of the problem with Video Game Donkey in general, is that he probably has some real opinions, but he needs probably another channel, and he may very well have another channel I'm just not aware of, where he actually does serious reviews instead of just the joke 3-minute reviews. Sonic Frontiers did smash the series record for concurrent Steam players, so a lot of people definitely were enthusiastic around it. Although in all fairness, these numbers aren't super high, and that probably comes to the fact that Sonic just really has never been a PC game. Nintendo Japan is now refusing to repair products if the customers threaten or harass its staff. The country's Ministry of Welfare has praised Nintendo's stance. I suppose this is potentially a very dangerous thing, even in Japan, to say that we have the right to refuse to repair things if we feel you were being rude. Now, I say rude, but yeah, I was right here. According to the site, actions that could make Nintendo refuse to repair a product include intimidation or threats, that seems somewhat reasonable, but honestly it's not, because it could be legal threats. I'm going to sue you if you don't repair this product. But then immediately it's insulting and denigrating remarks. So if you just say, oh, well, you don't look very good today, you just hurt the feelings of somebody. Invasion of privacy. Okay, that's somewhat acceptable. Invasive demands such as a free repair when the warranty is expired. Excessive demands. Well, inherently, I guess they're implying that in the past asked for a you could have asked for a free repair outside the warranty window, and they would have said demanding an apology from Nintendo staff without reasonable cause, excessively repeating the same request or complaint, defamatory comments on social networks or websites. Okay, this seems like this is a weird list to come out with. This is definitely saying the customer is not always right, and that they are not going to do what up until this point has been the Japanese um, um, Japanese people have always bent over backwards to make sure the customer is satisfied, and of the one thing for Japan to assume from the West is the screw the customer attitude, which this comes off like you probably need to say these things, but you have to be very careful about how you say this too, because um, this comes off as really a screw the customer attitude, and they probably don't mean it that way, but it definitely comes off that way. It's probably better to not have something so obvious and just say, you know what, we're just going to refuse the customers on a case by case basis. The idea now that they are going to potentially scour social networks to see if you insulted them, or listen in on every single thing that's said, and immediately say, oh well, that's insulting, that seems ridiculous. And I think this is one of those cases where you get more flies with honey than you do vinegar, and there's no reason to come out like this. I seriously doubt there's been a massive increase of Japanese, and remember, this is just Japanese Nintendo fans asking for warranty repairs from the Japanese company. I doubt too many of them have been insulting. We made a decision after concluding our customers would understand because of the reputation we have built of faithfully responding to them. Has Nintendo been faithfully responding to its customer base? Maybe for warranty somewhat, but not really. Like, remember, this is all in the shadow of Joy-Cons breaking like crazy. And so, inherently, most of this is probably broken Joy-Cons, broken Nintendo Switches, them making a product that is inferior. Let's just be honest. The Nintendo Switch is an inferior product. It's not as sturdy built as it should have been built. The Joy-Cons do have Joy-Con drift very early. So they really don't have a reputation of making solid hardware. Honestly, this isn't also too out of line of the way some of the NES attitudes of repairing the NES were too, and they eventually had to learn their lesson that this is a toy that kids are going to play with, and it is just going to get broken by kids doing things maybe they shouldn't do, but you're just going to have to bite that cost, because there is definitely a training for Nintendo repair guides where they're basically blaming the kids for spilling Cokes on the NES, or cramming peanut butter in the NES, and just trying to blame the kids for the NES, which also was a pretty faulty electronic device. Like, according to Kyoto News Report, there's no law against customers harassing staff in Japan, but some companies have been incorporating anti-harassment rules into its terms and conditions. Almost certainly this is wrong. I cannot imagine that Japan does not have a harassment law on the books, a single harassment law on the books. There isn't criminal pestering, there isn't something. You couldn't civilly sue somebody. Inherently, this is a big company saying we're not going to fulfill the thing we promised to fulfill, which is just to repair the product. The real solution to this is just quick, fast customer service. This person's a jerk. Let's just give them what they want and go away. Very few people in Japan, I imagine, are committing large-scale fraud in which they're trying to get free warranty replacements for no reason. The Japanese government potentially praising this, country's Ministry of Welfare praising this, is really just politics. But of course, the Japanese government also wants everybody to fall in line and fall under the power of, if not the government, then large corporations. But yeah, there's really just not, when you're talking repairing a product, there was really not any major scam you can do here. Like the best scam I imagine you could do is buying a bunch of broken Nintendo products on the cheap, then demanding Nintendo repair them, and then selling it for a profit. And that's something you could catch very quickly. Like if somebody's saying I've got 2 or 3 switches that are broken and I need repaired in over the course of a year, obviously that's somebody you could just single out and potentially sue. But yeah, this is draconian. We're changing the rules. Pray we don't change it further. We're going to use this to deny a lot of repairs. And inherently, this is just Nintendo trying to save money and not repair things. And they're just going to be rude about it because Nintendo has been slow and bad. Particularly in the Japanese. Well, demanding an apology from Nintendo is pretty much the thing that Nintendo should do as far as the Japanese society. You always apologize even if it's not really your fault, to smooth things over. The idea that a company would say, we're not doing the Japanese things of always apologizing to smooth things over, is Nintendo being very crazy. But maybe that's a sign of maybe that's a sign of Japan changing and the people in charge changing and the way Japanese people think changing. Maybe Japan is no longer a culture where you fall on your sword, metaphorically or literally. Moving on, Hideo Kojima wants to explore creating films and music. This is not news. He claims his body is 70% made of movies, jokingly. I mean, this is totally not news. Anybody who knows anything about Hideo Kojima knows that he's been trying to get into California, like Hollywood-like activities, films and music, and that's why he's been rubbing elbows with celebrities and hiring celebrities for his games and making his games so cinematic. And yeah, no surprise there. The European Commission responds after Microsoft Activision comments from the staffer received backlash. The quote here is, "My comments are personal and not a commission position," claims Richard Cardoso. I don't know what these comments are. This person was the deputy head, or is the deputy head of the unit Institute and Outreach at the governing body, tweeted earlier this week that the commission is working to ensure that you will still be able to play Call of Duty on other consoles, including my PlayStation. The statement, while factually in line with the remit of the body, was met with criticisms from some players over perceived Sony bias, especially following repeated assurances from Xbox claiming Call of Duty will remain on PlayStation for the foreseeable future. So yeah, this is another great example of somebody that should not be posting to Twitter. Like, at a certain level, a new Twitter, or Twitter itself, really should just be, you have to be a corporation, you have to be a business entity, you have to be a C-suite employee to comment or post. The idea of personal tweets should be in their own little category, marked private by default, because it just causes so much of this problems. Or at least like top level posts potentially should be private by default and not seen by everybody. Although that doesn't increase free speech, and that would just be hiding what this guy is saying. At a certain level, this is just like not news. The new statement from the European Commission in particular, it says, Mr. Cardoso is not involved in the assessment of the transaction. Furthermore, as indicated clearly in his Twitter profile, he tweets in a personal capacity, so that they're not backing him per se, but they're not also shooting him or stabbing him in the back. They're just saying, look, he's not involved in the assessment of this transaction, so basically no comment. But yeah, this is a great example of how to get a lot of people angry at you and a lot of people tweeting at you for no good reason. There's 1.9 thousand replies on this comment that is effectively just a personal comment that should not have had anywhere that many replies. NCSoft has announced LLL, a trailblazing MMO third-person shooter. This seems to feel a little bit like Castlevania related, because there was this big ball of flesh in Castlevania. This screenshot does. This LLL looks completely different. Let's see, 30 square kilometer open world where a post-apocalyptic Seoul 10th century. There's this coexistent timeline. Interesting. So 3 different people from 3 different timelines, all in this post-apocalyptic Seoul, South Korea. So that doesn't seem to make much sense. Hmm. 10th century Byzantine Empire and 23rd century. Well, I guess maybe it's just 2 different factions coexisting in one timeline. Although coexisting may be a bit of an overstatement. Well, that sounds like a kind of weird game, but it might be interesting. I'm not going to dismiss it completely, but I'll dismiss it mostly. Moving on, Apple's AR/VR headset will reportedly include a 3D video service in its own metaverse. The Reality branded headset will reportedly cost between $2,000 and $3,000. At that price, you almost have to assume that the 3D video service is included for free there for at least a few years. And this may be an attempt at Apple to own the idea of 3D video. But when you look at like Apple TV exclusives, there really aren't a lot of that, and I just don't think 3D video would be much more. You're going to have potentially 100 videos, and that's it. Unless they're just going to actively try and get a bunch of old 3D videos from the days of making 3D movies, back when that was how they were selling TVs, like active shutter, passive shutter, 3D movies, or 3D porns. Inherently, though, 3D video is different than virtual reality, so you're not going to be able to, I assume, in a lot of the 3D videos, walk around and see a 3D character so much, look at the back of the head of characters, for instance, as much as you're just going to be able to see them pop off a screen a little bit. And so it's probably going to be mostly a gimmick. Metaverse itself is obviously a gimmick at this point, and just not going to happen. It's probably a good idea that companies are working on this, if you assume that companies should be working on things to move technology further, but that doesn't inherently mean that VR will ever be a thing. I imagine it is just going to be a fad, like every other time VR has tried to come about, and people will just never really embrace VR because it's going to be too cumbersome. Like, once we get to the point where VR headsets are as light as glasses, maybe, but even at that, a lot of people don't like wearing glasses because they're too heavy and they're frustrating. It really needs to just be something that goes directly in your brain, and you just wear a little soft hat or something like that. Pokemon Company is warning it could block online play for users trading modified players. Players who do it unintentionally won't be affected, it claims. Which, yeah, I could see a reason why you might want to do that, but in this case I don't know the real reason. And if anything, this is Game Freak / Nintendo also coming down pretty harsh. Seems like they woke up on the wrong side of the bed this week as far as Nintendo and Game Freaks. Illegally modified data is a weird phrase to use. Whose game does it really ruin if you get a like if you trade or exchange a modified Pokemon? Yeah. Doesn't it just ruin the kids' players? Isn't this really a policy that's just going to tell kids, hey, we're going to block a significant portion of the game that you paid for because you decided to cheat, or unknowingly somebody tried to cheat for you or give you a modified Pokemon and make your game easier? Like, I don't think there's a player versus player aspect or an MMO aspect to Scarlet and Violet. So you really don't need to be that draconian about it. Just let them cheat. Who cares? Maybe they're trying to create some Pokemon Home integrity for a potential player versus player concept later, but that doesn't exist now. And at a certain point, isn't the thing that Pokemon Home shouldn't it be able to, if it can identify a Pokemon that's been modified, can't it just then unmodify it and say, hey, this is a Pikachu that has too high of a stat that you would just never have, or it has something else in it that is just not something you would ever be able to do legitimately. Let's just delete that data and give a standard random Pikachu in in replacement. Call it something fancy. Your Pikachu mutated. Or something like that, and then just put it back. But just blocking online. It says online play, so there must be some player versus player element in Scarlet and Violet that I'm just not aware of. Yeah. And inherently, I guess this also highlights the problem with online play, is that by trying to get everybody into the idea of online play, they have slowly boiled the frog here to try and create these playgrounds in which they control the rules, and people just can't play a game the way they want to play it anymore. It's now you're under the thumb of your government and any other governments that want to put their thumb on you, and now you're under the thumb of every single corporation in the world that you interact with. You want to play a Nintendo game, you're under the thumb of Nintendo. You want to play an Xbox game, you're under the thumb of Microsoft. You want to play specifically Call of Duty, then you're under the thumb of Activision Blizzard. I think they own Call of Duty, I'm not sure. It's just a ridiculous system where more and more option / freedom is being taken away from. But certainly I can also say, if there really is online player and player versus player in Scarlet and Violet, and I'm just not aware of that, I can see why you probably need to do something to stop that. But you've got to really do it, particularly for Pokemon games with kids clubs, and not just say, well, this might happen. Although in all fairness, this is also potentially a little sensational journalism too, because I imagine you just always put those kinds of rules down, and then it just usually isn't getting reported on. But it does point to the growing narrative of there being a lot of cheaters in video games, when yes, there are a lot of cheaters in video games, but the numbers I don't think are particularly going up, nor do I think you can really take the numbers down, because a lot of cheaters are not your average gamer who's between 25 and 30. They are your 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, people like that just want to beat the game, are really struggling. There are no cheat codes in the game to help them, so then they go outside of the game to help them. And arguably that may be just an argument of Pokemon being a little too hard, which it is too hard of a game. It takes too long. I suppose it's also worth mentioning that in the Pokemon anime, Ash Ketchum finally has made it to being the world champion, which I suspect means that the voice actress, I think it was an actress that voices Ash Ketchum in Japanese, is probably getting pretty old at this point and wants to retire. So I could see them retiring her and bring about some of the other Pokemon characters, like Misty, or well, ideally you'd probably want to do just like a whole new generation and have Ash Ketchum grow up and then start over with a new voice actor and new characters. But you could certainly also hand it over to some of the side characters and follow their journeys, or you could just wrap up the anime series. It's a long enough anime series that you don't need to continue it. It doesn't need to really go on forever. Moving on, Modern Warfare 2 and PS5 topped the US game industry sales in October, which I guess that's not super surprising, and this is Video Games Chronicles. A TV exec who worked on The Walking Dead and The Boys has launched a new game studio. Sharon Tal Uguado's Astrid Entertainment is making the first fantastical interactive world. Making its first fantastical interactive world. Notably, when you get below the fold, This senior media executive also worked on The Lord of the Rings of Power, which is particularly poorly received. So, being an executive, who knows how much influence and how much positive influence this person really had on any of these shows. But I guess they're making a new video game company, and making a new video game company is probably not a bad thing for more competition. Unfortunately, this probably highlights more than anything how money talks, and money gives you power to be more of a creative influence than you really should be, because obviously this TV exec is able to start a company that has a chance of succeeding just because they're rich, not because they're particularly have shown any talent at all. Although, in all fairness, this might also be like the smartest person we've seen in a very long time to start a video game company, because almost always it is a game director or a programmer who starts a video game company. So it's an artistic person who starts a company and then eventually immediately becomes the management of the company, and they stop being the artistic associate level employee that they were before. At least in this case, you have a manager starting a company and being a manager, so he might be very good at just keeping the budget correct and making business deals and things like that. Although, arguably, making business deals is not so much a skill as it is who you know and just cronyism. Moving on, The Witcher 3's delayed new gen update gets a December release date. It'll arrive as a free upgrade for existing owners. Which maybe that is an argument that I should buy Witcher 3 on Steam if I haven't done that already, because the upgrade may not be free for other people and the price may go up for Witcher 3. Now definitely would be the time to buy Witcher 3 if you don't have it. And I never played the DLC, and I would like to play the DLC at some point, but I'll probably never will get around to it. God of War Ragnarok and the Game Awards nominations we already talked about. In fact, we already talked about it from Video Games Chronicles, so basically this is just the same article with even more categories than what I saw before. So I'm gonna leave it for time's sake to you if you want to read all of these nominations. Inherently knowing the nominations I don't think matters in this case, because I don't believe this is a popular vote. So announcing nominations when people cannot vote for the game in any way is pointless. We should just wait until December's award season and they actually give the awards. PlayStation has been working on NFTs and blockchain technology. A Sony patent reveals. Almost certainly everybody has. It's stupid and crazy that they're doing that, but it's the world we're living in, as IT companies are desperate to maintain their relevancy, and video game companies are desperate to increase their profitability well past what is sustainable. Apparently, Xbox proactively suspended up to 4.8 million user accounts in the first half of 2022. This is part of a transparency report. Notably, I would say Microsoft, unlike other companies, is not flaunting this number. That their actual journalism had to happen here. Somebody actually had to read the transparency report and see if there was anything worth reporting on. 4.8 million user accounts probably isn't that many, because you would expect that at least half of those numbers are the same people trying to do the same bad actions over and over again, and just really known bad actors trying to cheat in some way or hack in some way. if this was really an issue or a big news, we would have had much more reports of people getting their accounts banned. Again, it's kind of the same situation where on YouTube, we're constantly seeing YouTubers complain about getting unfair demonetizations. I don't hear about anybody on Xbox complaining about being unfairly banned. Maybe every now and then you'll have somebody say, "Well, I was with a group of friends and we were texting and I used the N word, but amongst my group of friends that's acceptable." And even in that, you're like, "No, I kind of still side with Xbox on that. If they just want to say even amongst your group of friends you can't say certain words, it is censorship certainly, and it would be nice if the platforms were free speech, but they aren't. So just go into chat, text chat, or verbal chat knowing that. Arguably, everybody could learn better to watch their mouths at all times and just not get into the habit of using such inflammatory dialogue, because it's just never going to serve you well unless you want to get into fights, unless you want to get beat up using bad words. Any kind of bad words, even hell and damn, only hurts you in life. Although arguably I do look down on people who say like heck and darn it, but not as much as I look down on people who are using hell and damn all the time. Mostly people use the F word as replacement words. Generally speaking, I'd also say if you want to insult somebody, doing it in an intelligent way with more than just one or two words is going to cut much deeper. Moving on to the Gematsu articles, which we don't have a lot. There's just like not a lot of news this Monday. Krafton has acquired Neon Giant, the studio behind The Ascent. We had already talked about that. My YouTube follow list wrapped around, and I had a little bit of trouble getting it to start back at 1, because the way my YouTube follow list works is it always jumps back like 15 spaces just to make sure it's starting before the title it's supposed to start on. So when I told it to go to the thing in the first space, it then subtracted 1 from 15 from 1, and so it started timing out and having problems looking for the negative 15th location, negative 14th location. I could have just sat there and waited for it to fix itself, but it was taking about 30 seconds each time. So yeah, I'll have to remind myself to add 15 to the number if you know the exact number. Usually that's just not really a problem once you get past the very edge. It is literally an edge case problem of programming. And I could fix it with just better code, certainly. I could say if the number is negative, then change it to 0. Moving on, Hogwarts Legacy Extended Gameplay Showcase from Gematsu, if you want to check that out. Honor of Kings World Gameplay Reveal Trailer. This looks visually interesting from Tencent. I really am very close to uninstalling Nikke. Demon Slayer has another DLC character. I'm gonna have to go to the bathroom here, and I don't really want to Project LLL. I really don't want to pause the stream, so I may just end the stream and leave some stuff for Wednesday. Some Japanese game releases from Gematsu. The new games studio Asteroid Entertainment was formed by former Amazon Studios and Fox Group executive. You know what? Actually, I think I will just pause the video, and I'll be back in a few minutes. Be right back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Man, I really wish there was a better pause screen option in YouTube, but it's just not it's a non-existent feature, it would kind of make some great sense if I could say hit pause and then it would just pick another video or a bunch of YouTube shorts or something to show, and while you have breaks, like the whole idea of breaks and commercial breaks being in the middle of TV and movies, well, TV, not so much movies, it was that there were actual times where you needed breaks. Humans needed to go to the bathroom, or you needed to reset the stage or something like that, in TV, and YouTube just completely ignored that as a concept because it was pre-recorded footage until relatively recently, when live streaming was introduced, which was years ago, but still relatively recent compared to the uploads. Let's see. So we were saying from Gamatsu, a new game studio, Astrid Entertainment, has been founded by a former Amazon Studios and Fox News Group executive. NetEase Games is among the initial investors. There is this is Fox Network Group, not Fox News Group, so it may not actually be connected to Fox or Fox TV channel, Fox News, or anything like that, but it might be. I would think that most of the heavily liberal video game journalist sites and heavily liberal video game companies would not give a company a chance if Fox Network is particularly connected to is not particularly connected to it. But I guess this is a Fox Network Group senior media executive, so one person, so they might be able to give them a chance. Although these new companies have to actually make games, and that'll be years from now before you can really give any company a chance. And so it barely is even news to say a new game company has started. It's much more important and relevant news to say a new game company has a announcement. And if you are going to announce a new company, and this is a mistake I think even Second Dinner did, is they needed to, on day one, announce the kind of game they're making and working on, if not have a trailer for their new game on day one of announcing their company. There isn't really a reason why you have to publicly announce that a company has been formed. You can fill out the LLC forms, you can fill out all the legal paperwork and form a company and just not mention it. And yet they seem to celebrate it and make a big deal about it to try and get investors, which is just kind of ridiculous. That immediately you form a company and your company is designed around, let's get somebody else to pay for things, which unfortunately is kind of the case of how things go, but it is just a example of how businesses have been allowed to become way too big, and small and medium businesses have been made in such a way incapable of succeeding because they can't compete with these big businesses that are getting investments. Moving on, Splatoon 3's Chill Season 2022 content launches December 1st, which there's a lot of green here in this. I don't know what actually Chill Season is, but it's a Splatoon 3 thing, and I'm not going to play Splatoon, so it's actually fairly hard to play Splatoon. It's what I think I finally resolved, that you can't really play Splatoon 1 because it's not on the Switch. Splatoon 2 you can play, but there's not a ton of single player content. And Splatoon 3 you can play on the Switch, but again, not a ton of single player content. It's definitely not the focus. So if I was going to play Splatoon 2 and Splatoon 3 just for single player content, I'd be overpaying a lot to do that. And I'm not getting anywhere playing Switch games anyways. I'm still months later, haven't made any progress on Breath of the Wild just because I'm not choosing to play it and instead working on other projects. Moving on, Gamatsu says Mika and the Witch's Mountain has been delayed to 2023. I don't really recognize this game, though, so I may very well have missed an announcement. Or maybe this was that game that was just announced on Friday and it's immediately being delayed. It kind of feels like it would be a 3D platformer, but then the problem with this is you're flying on a broom, which, yeah, it is surprising that there aren't more games where you can fly on a broom, but without some kind of energy gauge like in the lower right hand corner, which maybe that is your energy gauge, it seems like you could just fly anywhere and everywhere, which eliminates the idea of platforming, which eliminates a lot of the ideas of most games. Moving on, Bandai Namco trademarks Ultimate Ninja Storm Connections in Europe, which I assume this is a Ultimate Ninja Storm spin-off game, maybe even a cell phone game. And that's it for the Gamatsu articles. So now we're just looking at games. Let's see, I'm going to give this a follow because it looks different. Maybe you'd argue it looks bad, but I'll stick with different. Butterfly's Dream. I'll give this a follow too. Oh, wait, no, this is already on the follow list. Was this other one on the follow list? No. November 14th. This one. Yeah, because I was having trouble with the follow list. I'll give this more time and leave this on the follow list. Mob Love is a visual novel. It's rated positively. I feel like Mob Love may have some nudity in it, but maybe not. Military War visual novel, technically good enough to be on the wish list, so I'll put it on the wish list. This is episode 3 remastered, so you might want to have to check to make sure that there's the entire Muv-Luv Unlimited series, or the entire Muv-Luv series. Yeah, there's a whole megaverse here for 216 cents, and the Unlimited The Day After series is $76. It's probably too much of a commitment, to say the least, and to put that on the wish list. Yeah, I'm going to take it off the wish list because I know that the first game here is on the wish list, and then the first game here is on the wish list. So, yeah. And basically both of those games are on the wish list if I just got really, really deep into visual novels, which I probably won't, and wanted to go through an incredibly long series. It is worth pointing out here, it's just like Muv-Luv Alternative, Photon Flowers, Photon Melodists, and then Total Eclipse Remastered, and then The Day After 0, 1, 2, and 3. That's a lot of visual novels, each selling for at least $30 on average, or maybe closer to $25 on average. Yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna remove this from the follow list just to say, yeah, there's not quite a good enough argument to have all of them on the wish list first. I need to start with the first games. Worst case scenario would be that somebody gave me the third game in a series and then I'd feel the need to buy it. Here we have Ninja Gaiden Sigma. Now these games have brackets and that's why they were at the end of the fall list. I'm not sure the Ninja Gaiden Master Collection, Ninja Gaiden Sigma um, is the best version of this, but I think it probably is. It's a thing that I really should research more of as far as how a game, which of the Ninja Gaiden games, of any of the Ninja Gaiden games, should be played. One thing I wanted to point out is that with the fan-made Resident Evil 4 remake, you still kind of have low polygon images, so even a remaster that's done by the actual creators here, which I assume this is a somewhat remaster, even here the visuals as far as just ears and faces seem at least a fraction of a step better. There's really no adjusting the 3D models like in the Resident Evil 4 HD collection as I understand it. I think it is just retexturing, which retexturing only gets you so far. We have another visual novel. Yep. There is, I guess, if there was a way to do it, that somebody's got to program this, or somebody should program this. If I had enough followers that guaranteed that there would always be somebody in the chat in each stream, I could pull up a visual novel during each stream and have the chat decide what dialogue choices. Or I could pull up a kinetic visual novel and just have it automatically click, which either one of those would, a kinetic visual novel automatically clicking wouldn't make a lot of sense. This game is just not relevant, and it's been a year. So yeah, that would be an interesting trick. I would almost certainly need a lot more people. I'm gonna leave this to think about it some more. Like, this might be a nice little homage to a game. I guess I should look at the reviews, see what people have to say. Fairly short, straightforward third-person shooter adventure through a church, exploring an empty church in the waking world for items for 10 minutes before you sleep in a nightmare. This is Studio Gekko's first title. So you have like 2 negative in Japanese there, and positive in Japanese, positive in Japanese, positive in Japanese. Did Studio Gekko do anything else? No. This was 2 years ago. I think that kills the relevancy here. So you have kind of like a debut title that's not really that big of a deal. And I think it kind of falls apart. Effectively what this feels like then is it's just like a Fortnite game if you had an anime girl on as the character. There's not a ton of polish in the interface or anything like that, so yeah, it just lacks relevancy. And I'm just not that desperate to play irrelevant games, although that would be close to the line. So now we're at the numbers, so this should be back at the beginning. 6 Mon Adventure. 92% positive with 27 reviews. I guess I'll give that some more time. 6 reviews for 50 Waves Hero. I think we can take that off the follow list. 48 hours is mixed, which is kind of a shame because I kind of like the looks on that. Eventually we'll get to the point where we're looking at new games. Reborn, not again. We'll take off because it's just not relevant. Alright, so sketch crawler. Well, what happened here? Well, this is intriguing. I don't have any games at all that are new today. I don't know why that would have happened, but it's fairly obvious it has happened. So either over the entire weekend no games came out, which is not believable, or there was a glitch. And I don't want to run my new macro the second time, so what I'll try to do here, since there isn't really any new news otherwise, is I will pull up the macro to just open the page and I'll confirm myself what happened. Or I'll confirm myself that no new games came out over the weekend, which is not believable. Execute just that one command. Yeah, and there's nothing new on Steam. Okay, so well, it just didn't happen today, so we'll have a bunch to go through Wednesday. We can see Hentai Dark Elf as an adult game, and then Sex Simulator Love Room as an adult game, and then Mindhunt is probably an adult game. Terracotta looks like it might be an interesting game. Beat Hazard 3 might be an interesting game. Mech Pixel 3 I think we had already talked about, but maybe not. The Bible, interesting as a game. Sweetie Kitty may be an adult game. Let's see, a game called The Oregon Trail. That sounds interesting. There was a game called The Oregon Trail on Steam, but it didn't really feel like it was the official Oregon Trail, if anybody actually has the rights to the Oregon Trail as a game. No, at a certain level, I probably could just scan through all the new games this way and it would be much quicker, but I would be really risking far too much as far as judging a book by its cover. Only Fap Simulator 4 may have been the last game that we talked about on Friday. That would be my guess. This Gore Screaming Show, I remember we looked at that. So, yeah. On Wednesday we'll have several games to look over, most of which almost certainly we will dismiss. This Japanese only game may be interesting to look at, but it probably doesn't support the language English. Yeah, there's definitely not anything here that we really need to mention. Poker Quest here might be interesting too. So I'll just double check and make sure that those games are covered. And then yeah, on my Twitter feed, there's no new news, which increasingly that may be just the case, and that may just save wrapping up. So, inevitably, we're not even going 3 hours in this stream. And I guess that's just that. I mean, there's really nothing else to do. So that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wish list. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.